Three men inside the most powerful room in American finance just broke ranks with the Federal Reserve Chair. And what happened next could become one of the biggest signals for silver this year. It hasn't happened like this in almost a decade. On a quiet Wednesday in July, three regional Federal Reserve presidents looked across the table at the new Fed chair and voted against him. Three dissenting votes. One deeply divided Fed. And now, less than 3 weeks later, that same Fed chair is preparing to step onto a stage in the mountains of Wyoming and deliver a speech that could send silver sharply higher or trigger another brutal reversal. And here's what makes this so important. The biggest silver signal right now may not be coming from a silver chart at all. It may be coming from inside the Federal Reserve. Because when the people controlling the price of money can't agree on what should happen next, markets don't simply wait for the answer. They start repricing the future. And silver can move faster than almost anything when those expectations change. Even if you've never owned a single ounce of silver, this matters to you. The Federal Reserve influences the interest you earn on savings, the cost of your mortgage, the price businesses pay to borrow, and ultimately the purchasing power of your money. And right now, a quiet fight is unfolding inside that institution. No shouting, no dramatic confrontation. Just three officials willing to break with the chair at a moment when investors are already trying to figure out where interest rates are headed. So the question isn't simply whether silver goes higher. The real question is this. What does the Fed's internal pressure mean for silver's next big move? By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's happening inside the Fed, why silver has continued rising despite a hawkish monetary environment, and why the next major speech from Fed Chair Kevin Warsh could become one of the most important moments for gold and silver investors this year. If you're interested in money, investing, gold, silver, and protecting your financial future, subscribe to Money Insights and like this video, because every week we break down the financial signals most investors don't notice until after the market has already moved. Let's start with the man at the center of this story. His name is Kevin Warsh, and if you don't recognize that name yet, you will by the end of this year. Warsh was sworn in as the 17th chair of the Federal Reserve back in May, replacing Jerome Powell after one of the closest Senate confirmation votes for a Fed chair in American history. When President Trump first nominated him back in January, almost every trader on Wall Street made the same assumption. They assumed Warsh would be the president's guy. Rate cuts, loose money, cheap borrowing, the whole playbook investors expected from someone the president personally chose. They were wrong, and they found out just how wrong within 24 hours. On the day Warsh's nomination was announced, gold and silver did something they hadn't done since the 1980s. They crashed. Silver alone lost roughly 30% of its value in a single trading session. Think about that for a second. Picture a retiree who had spent the last 2 years watching silver climb, feeling good about the coins sitting in a safe at home, only to watch nearly a third of that value disappear before lunchtime. That's not a small correction. That's a market completely repricing its assumptions about a person in real time. Why did it happen? Because Warsh immediately signaled the opposite of what everyone expected. Instead of talking about rate cuts, he talked about inflation discipline. Instead of promising to loosen policy, he made it clear he intended to keep financial conditions tight until inflation was truly under control. The market had bet on a dove. It got a hawk. And silver, which tends to move even harder than gold in both directions, absorbed the shock first and worst. To understand why that surprised so many people, it helps to know who Kevin Warsh actually is. He's not a career politician, and he's not new to the Fed. Warsh served on the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors nearly 2 decades ago, right through the 2008 financial crisis, one of the most turbulent stretches in modern American economic history. He left that post with a reputation as one of the more hawkish voices in the room, someone who worried about the long-term consequences of flooding the system with easy money, even when it felt politically convenient to do so. When his name resurfaced as a potential Fed chair, that history should have been the first clue about what kind of leadership was coming. Instead, the market got distracted by who nominated him rather than what he actually believed. His confirmation wasn't smooth either. The Senate vote came down 54-45, one of the closest confirmation margins for a Fed chair in American history, split almost entirely along party lines. That kind of narrow, contentious confirmation matters because it means Warsh took the chair without the broad institutional trust that past Fed chairs often enjoyed on day one. He arrived already under a microscope, and every decision since has been measured against the assumption that he owes his job to a president who has publicly and repeatedly pushed for lower rates. And that tension hasn't gone away. At a White House event earlier this summer, President Trump was asked directly whether he was disappointed the Fed held rates steady. His answer was telling. He said Warsh would love to see lower interest rates, but that he's got a board, a political board, that wants to keep rates up. Think about what that moment reveals. The president who nominated Warsh is now publicly implying that his own pick isn't fully in control of Fed policy, that the committee around him is the real obstacle. That's an extraordinary thing for a sitting president to say about the person he chose to lead the most powerful economic institution on earth. And it tells you the political pressure on this Fed isn't coming from one direction. It's coming from multiple directions at once. But here's where everything changes. That crash in January was just the opening scene of a much longer story, and the most important chapter is happening right now, in the last few weeks of summer. Fast forward to the end of July. The Fed held its regular meeting, and on the surface, nothing dramatic happened. Rates stayed exactly where they were, between 3.5% and 3.75%. That's the kind of headline that puts people to sleep. But if you actually looked at the vote count behind that decision, you'd find something almost nobody talks about on the evening news. The vote to hold rates steady was 9-3. 3 sitting Federal Reserve presidents from Cleveland, Minneapolis, and Dallas formally dissented because they wanted to raise rates, not lower them. That is the most divided vote the Federal Reserve has produced since 2016. Warsh himself, in a moment that tells you everything about how unusual this Fed has become, described those internal deliberations as a good family fight. Now here's the part most people miss. A good family fight inside the institution that sets the price of money for the entire planet is not a small thing. It means the people who are supposed to be the calm, boring stewards of the U.S. economy can't even agree amongst themselves on which direction to move. And when the people in charge of monetary policy are divided, markets get nervous. Nervous markets move fast, and nothing moves faster than silver. Almost nobody noticed this either. Despite all of that internal chaos, and despite a Fed chair who has been openly hawkish since day one, silver has still climbed roughly 70% over the past year. Think about what that actually means. The single most powerful monetary authority on earth has been actively trying to keep a lid on inflation expectations, actively signaling higher for longer interest rates, and silver climbed anyway. That's not supposed to happen. Higher interest rates are supposed to punish an asset like silver, which pays you no yield just for holding it. So why hasn't it worked? This is where the story gets interesting, and where we need to follow the money into a part of the market most people never look at, the bond market. Right now, the yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury bond has climbed to around 4.75%, its highest level in nearly 2 years. The 30-year bond, the one that essentially prices the cost of long-term borrowing for the entire American economy, has pushed above 5.25%, a level not seen in almost 2 decades. Normally, when the Fed signals it wants to keep rates high, you'd expect that to be enough to control the bond market on its own. But something else is happening underneath the surface, something that has very little to do with Kevin Warsh personally and everything to do with arithmetic. The United States government now carries a level of national debt pushing toward $40 trillion. At the same time, the biggest technology companies in the world are issuing corporate debt at a pace never seen before to fund artificial intelligence data centers. Both the government and Silicon Valley's biggest players are competing for the same pool of global capital at the same time. And overseas buyers, who used to soak up huge amounts of that government debt, have been pulling back. When demand for a bond falls and supply keeps rising, one thing happens. Yields go up. And when long-term yields rise for reasons that have nothing to do with the Fed's own target rate, it tells investors something the Fed itself cannot control. Markets are starting to worry about America's long-term fiscal health, not just this month's inflation number. History tells a very different story about what happens next when bond markets start pricing in fiscal anxiety rather than simple inflation fear. In past decades, when investors lost confidence that a government could manage its own debt responsibly, they didn't run to more paper promises. They ran to something that has held real value for over 5,000 years of human civilization. Precious metals, gold and silver, don't rely on any government's promise to pay you back. That's the psychological undercurrent running beneath every silver chart you'll see this year, and it helps explain why silver keeps finding buyers even while the Fed talks tough. Now, here's a contradiction worth sitting with for a moment, because it's exactly the kind of detail that gets buried under bigger headlines. Silver isn't just a safe haven metal people buy out of fear. Nearly half of all silver demand comes from industry. Solar panels, electric vehicles, medical devices, and increasingly the physical infrastructure behind artificial intelligence data centers. All rely on silver's unmatched electrical conductivity. Some analysts at major banks have recently warned that solar panel manufacturers are adopting new thrifting technologies designed to use less silver per panel, which could reduce industrial demand from that sector by a meaningful amount this year. On paper, that should be bearish for silver. And yet, silver rose anyway. Why? Because at the exact same time solar demand growth is slowing, the build-out of AI data centers is exploding, and those facilities are hungry for the same wiring, connectors, and components that depend on silver. One source of industrial demand cools while another heats up, and investment demand from people worried about inflation and government debt piles on top of both. It's a tug of war happening in real time, and so far, The buyers are winning. Here's a hidden connection. Almost nobody outside the commodities world is tracking closely. China, historically one of the world's largest silver exporters, has flipped into becoming a massive net importer. Chinese buyers, both industrial and investment-driven, have been pulling record volumes of physical silver into the country. When the world's second-largest economy quietly shifts from selling silver to hoarding it, that tightens the global physical supply available to everyone else, right at the same moment Western investors are also buying more. Two of the largest sources of demand on Earth are now competing for the same shrinking pool of physical metal. There's another layer to this story that most casual investors never look at, and it lives inside the vaults of COMEX, the exchange where much of the world's paper silver trading actually happens. Inside those vaults, silver is split into two categories. Eligible, meaning metal that's simply sitting in storage, and registered, meaning metal that's actually available to satisfy a delivery request. When registered inventory shrinks relative to the number of paper contracts trading against it, it creates a widening gap between how much silver traders are betting on and how much physical silver could actually be delivered if everyone demanded it at once. That gap has been a recurring undercurrent in silver's story for years, and it's part of why physical premiums, the extra amount you pay above the spot price to actually hold silver in your hand, have stayed elevated even during periods when the futures price cooled off. It's a quiet reminder that the number flashing on your screen and the physical metal sitting in a vault somewhere are not always perfectly in sync. Which brings us to a number every serious precious metals investor watches closely: the gold to silver ratio. This ratio tells you how many ounces of silver it takes to buy a single ounce of gold. Historically, that ratio has swung anywhere from the high teens to well over 90. Right now, it sits around 67. Earlier this year, during the most explosive part of silver's rally, that ratio actually fell below 45, meaning silver was, relatively speaking, extraordinarily expensive compared to gold. It has since cooled back toward a more historically normal range. Some analysts at major banks expect that ratio to drift back toward 70 or even 75 over the next year as the industrial side of silver's story faces headwinds from a hawkish Fed. Others believe the deficit in physical silver supply, now in its sixth consecutive year according to industry data, will keep the ratio compressed for far longer than history would suggest. Nobody knows for certain which of those two forces wins, and that uncertainty is exactly why the next 3 weeks matter so much. This brings us to the single biggest date on the calendar for anyone watching gold and silver right now. From August 27th through the 29th, central bankers, economists, and policymakers from more than 70 countries will gather at the Jackson Hole Economic Symposium in Wyoming. On the morning of August 28th, Kevin Warsh will step up to deliver his very first keynote address as Federal Reserve Chair. This isn't a routine speech. It lands just 19 days before the Fed's next major interest rate decision on September 16th. And unlike his predecessor, Warsh has deliberately stripped away almost all forward guidance. He has shortened up post-meeting statements. He has given famously evasive answers at press conferences. He told reporters he wants this speech to step back from what he calls nearsighted debates and instead address bigger structural questions. He has also said plainly that the Fed is not constrained by market prices. Think about what that really means for a moment. Every modern Fed chair before him used carefully chosen words to gently prepare markets for what was coming so that trading floors wouldn't be blindsided. Warsh has explicitly rejected that approach. He wants markets to interpret the incoming economic data for themselves rather than lean on Fed signaling. For ordinary investors, workers, and retirees, that creates something the market has never had to deal with quite like this before: genuine, high-stakes uncertainty from the single most powerful economic voice in the world, arriving with almost zero warning. Now here's the bigger pattern connecting everything we've covered so far. You have 3 Fed presidents publicly dissenting in favor of higher rates. You have a Fed chair who refuses to signal his intentions in advance. You have bond yields climbing for reasons tied to America's own fiscal math, not just short-term inflation. You have a sitting U.S. president who has publicly complained that Warsh would love to see lower interest rates, but he's got a board. And you have silver sitting near the mid-$60 range, up more than 60% over the past year, waiting to see which of these forces wins. Picture a young couple trying to save for their first home right now. Every basis point the Fed holds rates higher makes their future mortgage more expensive. Every dollar the government borrows to cover a widening deficit adds pressure to long-term rates, which feeds directly into the interest rate on that mortgage. They're not silver investors. They may never buy a single coin in their life, but the same forces driving silver's rally worry about debt, worry about the dollar's long-term purchasing power, worry about a government that can't stop spending, are the exact same forces shaping whether they can afford a home next year. Picture a retiree living on a fixed income, watching their grocery bill creep higher every single month, even as headline inflation numbers get reported as cooling. That gap between the official inflation number and what people actually feel at the checkout counter is part of why so many ordinary Americans have quietly turned to gold and silver over the past 2 years, not as a speculative bet, but as a way to preserve purchasing power against a system they no longer fully trust to protect it for them. And picture a factory worker whose plant depends on stable input costs for the electronics or solar components it manufactures. If silver prices swing wildly after Jackson Hole, so does that plant's cost of production, and so, eventually, does that worker's job security. This isn't an abstract Wall Street story. It reaches into paychecks, mortgages, and grocery bills across the entire country. Now, let's pause and be honest about the risks here, because responsible investing means understanding both sides of this story. Silver is one of the most volatile assets in modern financial markets. The same leverage that produced silver's massive rally over the past year can just as easily accelerate a sharp decline. This isn't hypothetical. We already watched it happen once this year, when silver lost roughly a third of its value in a single day after Warsh's nomination was first announced. Price forecasts across major institutions vary wildly, with some analysts projecting continued gains toward $80 or higher, and others warning that a hawkish surprise from Warsh at Jackson Hole could send prices sharply lower in the short term. Nobody, no analyst, no bank, no YouTube channel, can guarantee you what happens next. Markets can stay irrational, volatile, and unpredictable for far longer than any of us expect. Consider just how wide the range of expert opinion actually is right now. Some major financial institutions have recently lowered their year-end gold forecasts, citing the expectation that the Fed is unlikely to cut rates at all this year. Others, pointing to persistent supply deficits and the same fiscal concerns we walked through earlier, believe both gold and silver still have significant room to run into next year. When professional forecasters with access to the same data can't agree on direction, that's not a signal to panic. It's a signal to stay humble about what any of us can actually predict with confidence. If you're considering precious metals as part of your financial plan, that decision should be made carefully, based on your own personal circumstances, risk tolerance, and ideally, a conversation with a qualified financial professional, not a single video or a single headline. So where does that leave us? Silver has already survived one violent shock this year, triggered directly by Fed leadership uncertainty. It has climbed anyway, supported by a sixth consecutive year of physical supply deficits, unprecedented Chinese import demand, and a bond market pricing in long-term fiscal anxiety that has nothing to do with any single Fed meeting. But the next major catalyst is no longer a mystery, and it isn't far away. On August 28th, in front of the entire financial world, Kevin Warsh will speak for the first time as Fed chair at Jackson Hole, 19 days before a September rate decision that markets currently see as close to a coin flip. He has told us almost nothing about what he'll say, and that more than any single data point we've covered today is exactly why silver got the signal it did. Markets don't just react to what central bankers say, they react even harder to what central bankers refuse to say. Right now, the Federal Reserve is under more internal pressure than it has faced in almost a decade. An unusually divided committee, a chairman who won't telegraph his next move, and a bond market quietly losing patience with Washington's finances. Whatever Kevin Warsh chooses to say on that stage in Wyoming will ripple through silver, gold, mortgages, and savings accounts across this entire country. That's not fear. That's simply where the story stands today. Pay attention to what happens at Jackson Hole because you now understand exactly why it matters more than almost anyone realizes. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insights and like this video. More powerful financial insights are coming next.